In Still Wakes the Deep, we take control of Cameron Cass McLeary, your typical Scottish man who, after assaulting a man for disrespecting his wife, ends up hiding as an electrician in an oil rig named Leodese, which is in the middle of the North Sea. It's the day after Christmas and he has just received a letter from his wife named Suze that basically says that either he returns and faces the consequences of his actions or she will leave him and take their daughters with her, which makes him sad. But hey, at least breakfast is ready. So Cass heads to the kitchen while snooping around the rooms, and this lets him know more about the people he has been working with, like what they dislike, and even how they shower. But this snooping also shows him that the place is falling apart, which is confirmed by Finley, who, while repairing something, complains about Rennick, who is the boss of the Leodese, and Cadal, which is the company that owns that oil rig. She also asks Cass for his lighter, and since he doesn't need it, Cass gives it to her. And look, a nice poster about how Cadal is awakening Scotland's sleeping giant. What a funny tagline! In the kitchen, Cass meets with Trots, who is giving a passionate speech to O'Connor and Gibbo about why they should unionize, then Brody and Ralphs, who are talking about how Ralphs shouldn't be afraid to go into the diving bell alone, and finally Adair, who warns Cass that he is going to get fired, to which Cass replies with, "You bald." Cass then goes to the counter and greets the cook of the place named Roy, and they start talking until Rennick, who sounds furious, orders Cass to go to his office over the intercom. So Cass chit-chats with Roy a bit more about his life, hears that Roy's insulin is at his cabin, and heads to the administration module, which is crossing the deck. Here Cass comes across even more co-workers like Ines and Muir, who are bantering between them, Roper, who is having issues with the drill, and Scooby, who asks Cass to fix the lift. And by repairing it, Cass reaches Rennick's office, where he gets yelled at for bringing the attention of the police to the rig, hears Rennick ordering to continue with the perforation even though the drill is stuck on something, and gets fired. Because of this, Cass goes to the helipad so he can be taken back to the mainland. But before he can board the helicopter, the platform shakes violently, and one of his colleagues loses his footing and ends up hanging for dear life, before falling into the void. And after the rig shakes again, Cass follows suit. While unconscious, Cass has an odd vision of a weird-looking corpse, a hole, and what seems to be a memory of when he and Roy were discussing with Suze his decision to go hide on the oil rig, and although they were trying to convince her that the plan was sound, Suze wasn't that on board. Thankfully, Cass gets saved by Brody and Douglas, who take him into a room where he wakes up, warms up a bit, and begins to hear some muffled screams coming from outside, which turns out to be from Raps, who seems to be trapped inside the diving bell. So Cass helps lift it so Brody can rescue him, and Brody tells Cass that all that trembling was caused by the drill hitting something, and that he should go to the top of the rig to see what's going on. But since the only way up is through engineering, Cass has to go under the rig, where he finds this. And where he is yelled at by Douglas. Cass then does some parkour, enters a leg, sees something at the bottom of it, hears Rennick saying that the drill is having some issues, hears something crawling around, and finds some blood before reaching engineering. And look! Finley's here. She tells Cass that he should be careful while going through there because the oil or something has made a co-worker named Gibbo change, and not for the best. And after Cass sees an indescribable amalgamation of meat, bones, blood, and human parts, and finds signs of an attack, he begins to hear Gibbo, who is screaming in pain and who startles Cass while going down some stairs. Wait, zoom in? What the fuck? Cass then finds the corpse of Douglas, hears Gibbo lamenting what happened, and finally leaves that forsaken place, which takes him to accommodation, where he warms up a bit and recomposes himself before getting a call from O'Connor saying that he is in engineering, and although Cass tries to warn him about Gibbo, the signal gets lost. So Cass begins looking for a way to the deck, coming across these things that are blocking the doors, and also hearing someone struggling, who turns out to be Trots. And although Cass tries to help him, since the door is locked, the only thing he can do is hear him suffer. Cass then reaches the kitchen, jump scares Roy, and gets him up to speed on what's going on and what they should do. And since Rennick hasn't called for an evacuation, they decide that Cass is going to go clear a path to the lifeboats, come back for Roy, and get the hell out of there.
You won't leave me.
No, I will never, Roy. Thankfully, after finding more media amalgamations that seem to be made of people, almost getting killed by these things, hearing something moving through the vents and some screams, doing some parkour, and hearing Rennick ordering a rendezvous at the evacuation point, Cass reaches the lifeboats. But there's a tiny problem. Or maybe two. Or maybe three. Here, Kaz receives a call from Rennick, who accuses him of destroying the lifeboats.
Fuck off, Rennick!
And also tells Kaz that he and whoever is still alive should get to the helipad as fast as possible without touching any of the stuff that has been appearing around the rig. Kaz then Sparta kicks a door, gets a call from Ines, who is at the derrick and says that something is happening to him before the signal gets lost, and enters accommodation again, where he comes across Trots. Thank God, Kaz escapes and goes to Roy to tell him about the lifeboats and Rennick's rendezvous, which would be good news if it weren't for the fact that Roy hasn't had his insulin, and without it, he won't make it across the deck. So Dr. Kaz advises him to eat some jam.
Bloody hell, the man's a medical genius!
They decide that Kaz is going to go to the helipad and stop Rennick from leaving, while Roy goes for his insulin. But this is easier said than done, because once Kaz exits accommodation, he realizes that the deck is a mess, and something is lurking in the fog. However, since Rennick is pressuring everyone to hurry so they can leave, Kaz has no other choice than to continue, which makes him come across the corpse of another co-worker and see how Dobby gets taken by something in the fog.
Dobby!
At least he finds Ines though, who tells Kaz that that thing is Muir. And after sneaking around, seeing something coming out of the derrick, finding more corpses, evading Muir, and helping Ines get out of a shipping container, both reach the elevator. But Ines gets taken by Muir. Alone again, Kaz begins to hear Rennick ordering the pilot to leave, so he tries to stop them, but he is too late. Or maybe not, because look, they are coming back! This makes Kaz have another vision, which seems to have happened before the first one, and thanks to this, we learn that Roy was the one that got Kaz the job on the rig, that Kaz was leaving the next day, and that Sus was threatening Kaz with ending the relationship if he left. Kaz then wakes up, sees the aftermath of the crash, and ends up at Rennick's office, where a letter from the police lets us know that Kaz has been hiding in this rig for 4 months, which means that Sus was just bluffing, and where he also gets a call from Brody, who tells him to go to the radio room and contact the support ship so they can get help.
Hello? Hello? Shit. Hey.
It's Brody.
I know who it is, you daft prick.
Because of this outage, Brody changes the plan and now Kaz has to go and fix the generators, which are in engineering. Oh, and after this call, he also gets a call from a co-worker named Davros, who informs him that he is at the lifeboats. Anyway, Kaz then enters the administration module, gets a call from Scooby saying that he's hunting them, comes across more stuff, and finds out who he is. After surviving Rennick, doing some parkour, hearing a man named Bruce drowning while saying that he had to leave O'Connor behind, and almost dying because of a gas leak, Kaz reaches engineering. And look, Finley is here. Thanks to her, Kaz learns that the Leodese has suffered a lot of damage, and that he might only need to reset the protective relay so the generators start working again. But of course, it doesn't work. So Kaz has to go and restart them manually. And after coming across more of this stuff, which is getting bigger and weirder, and hearing some wailing coming from the generator's room, Kaz comes face to face with Dobby. Kaz then evades him, restarts the generator, changes a fuse, and resets the protective relay. And with this, the Leodese has energy again. But of course, there's another problem, because according to Brody, the Leodese is sinking, and the only way to stop it is by stabilizing its legs. Which means basically that while Brody goes to adjust the tension cables of legs C and D, Kaz has to go and adjust the ones of legs A and B. And the first one is pretty easy, Kaz just has to do some parkour and voila! The cable is adjusted. But the second one is where things get pontoony, because after coming across another corpse, Kaz enters a room where he hears his wife? And watches as the body of Bruce emerges from the passage he has to cross, which almost makes him suffer the same destiny. He then has to enter the bilge line, and then he has to swim for his life because there's a leak, and then he has to swim even more because the room he is in is flooded, and then he has to cross a room that has more of these things and where he can hear someone screaming. Someone who turns out to be O'Connor, who is being held by the amalgamations and who is in some kind of trance calling for his wife Mary. Oh, what the hell? Thankfully, Kaz reaches and adjusts the other cable, and with this, the Leodese won't sink anymore. And yes, there's some fire next to the oil, but who cares? At least there's no sign of the oh my. Kaz then leaves that place and reaches the top part of accommodation, where he contacts Troy to see how he's doing, and it turns out that he hasn't even gone for his insulin yet. But while Roy tries to motivate Kaz to keep going by telling him that Sus loves him and that his family is waiting for him, something explodes outside. So Kaz decides to go check it out, although not before he answers a call from Zeus? On the deck, Cass begins hearing some wailing and also sees that the thing at the derrick has gotten bigger, and for some strange reason, when he is near it, he hears the voice of Zeus. But hey, at least he finds Brody, who tells Cass that the explosion was caused by an issue with the stack and that they need to fix it before the whole rig explodes. Because of this, Cass goes to the processing module, evades Adair, and changes the flare to the auxiliary gas pipe. But of course, there's a problem, because Brody can ignite the flare remotely, so Cass has to go and do it manually. And although Adair tries to stop him, Cass turns it on, which sets Adair on fire and causes the total collapse of the flare. And you know what that means? This time, the vision seems to take place just after Cass assaulted the man because Zeus is fuming, telling him that he is stupid, while Cass, like every other man, he's just being stupid. Luckily, Cass wakes up under the rig, which looks even more hellish than before, and after he does some parkour and sees what Ruffs has become, Cass enters engineering once again. And here, he finds Finley and Brody, who get surprised that he is still alive and who tell him about their new plan to keep the Veiradi from collapsing, which goes something like this. While Brody goes to release the tension cables, Cass and Finley will go to marine control and flood the pontoons. And at first, Cass is on board with this plan, but after Roy speaks through the intercom saying that he is on the accommodation roof and that he needs help since he wasn't able to get his insulin, Cass decides to ditch them and go help him. Which makes Cass cross engineering, seeing how everything has gotten worse, then enter accommodation where he gets another call from his wife, and after he crosses the room where Trots was locked, Cass reaches the living quarters, where he finds Trots, who has been very busy. Or maybe Cass is just losing his mind. Who knows? Cass then finds the insulin, sees how Trots gets crushed, and heads to the roof to look for Roy. Finally, after all the failures, after all the problems, after all the deaths he has been witnessing, Cass is at least going to save his best.
Roy, talk to me, big man. Come on, Roy. Roy, wake up, you prick. Please wake up. Wake up, come on. Don't leave me here.
Cass is then contacted by Finley, who tells him that he needs to go to marine control since she wasn't able to reach it. So he does some parkour, sees how the thing of the derrick has become something otherworldly, and reaches the room. And with the help of Finley and Roper, who has transformed and appears to be afraid of Rennick for some reason, Cass floods the pontoons and makes the rig stable again. Now he only needs to meet Finley and Brody at Drill Ops to see what's next. But this isn't easy, because after hearing his wife through the intercom, Cass comes across more indescribable nightmares, survives a flood, gets another call from Zeus, has weird visions, and comes face to face with Rennick, who ends up drowning. Cass then finally reaches Finley, who is on the phone and seems very sad. And it becomes clear why once she gives the phone to Cass, because it turns out that although they have been doing everything to stop it, the Veiradi is at the brink of collapse. And the worst part is that Brody is still in the pontoons, drowning, dying. But there's no time to grieve. Cass has to go back with his family, so he tries to come up with a new plan, although Finley already has one that she had on the back burner since Cass fell off the stack, which is to use the lighter Cass gave her to make the whole place go boom. Of course, Cass tries to stop her, but she runs away, and Cass chases after her throughout the rig, which is just ruins at this point, until a crane falls on her. Here, Cass tries to help her, but Finley stops him and tells him not only that she has been hearing her little boy just like him with Zeus, but also that they need to destroy the entity before it's too late, before it spreads even more, before it reaches her kid and his wife and daughters. And although Cass hesitates for a moment, he grabs the lighter, sees the corpses of Phineas and Mir, enters the derrick, and finally does what needs to be done. But wait, because remember the letter from the beginning where Zeus basically gave Cass an ultimatum? Well, Zeus wrote another one after that. One that never reached him. One that, well...
Hey Cass, I'm sorry it's been so hard. I just wanted to send you this. I miss you and I love you. And the girls miss and love you. Whatever happens, we will be alright. I love you. Cameron McCleary. Be safe out there on those waters. My man. My love.